Hello, everyone. My name is Tim, and I'm your host of the All Out Coach podcast, where I inspire you to maximize your potential, create other leaders, add energy, add excitement, add character to your life and to your business. Today, I have a special guest, Thom Singer, who's a bright leader, an incredible host, speaker, TEDx speaker as well, whom I recently got to know via LinkedIn. So, Thom, welcome to All Out Coach. How
Hey,
are you
Tim,
today?
thank you so much for having me. I think you do a great job with this show.
Thank you so much. And I enjoy your YouTube channel, your podcast as well, called Making Waves, by the way. So he interviews many people who make waves. I'd like to first understand how you started to make waves early on in your career.
So I kind of was a lost soul when I was young, right? Like I have some friends like you who, went on and got advanced degrees and things like that. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So when I got out of college, I worked as a wedding photographer for a long time. Just, I worked for doing events and weddings and managed a company for someone else, had my own company on the side. But when I got into my late 20s, I realized I wanted to have more of a corporate type job. So I went into sales and marketing. And it was a long run. I was very successful. I won a lot of awards. I got to go on the trips that companies had and things like that. But as I got up the career ladder, I realized my ladder was against the wrong wall and I wasn't really doing the types of things I like to do. But when you're in a sales and marketing job, you go to a lot of conferences, a lot of events, a lot of meetings. And I would watch the speakers, the authors and the people who were the professional speakers. And I can remember, Tim, sitting in a chair watching them and thinking to myself, wow, she or he, they have a better job than I do. And so I spent the next 5 or 6 years after discovering I want to do what they do, sort of crafting what it would take to be the type of leader who would be invited to speak at conferences. And so I started small. I was the marketing director for a law firm. And I started training and teaching the lawyers how to network and do sales and business development. And I essentially transformed everything into a career. And the last 12 years, most of my time has been spent speaking for companies and at association conferences. So I got to make the waves I wanted to make.
You mentioned that you were able to rise up in the ranks. So I have a lot of mentors who come to my show and they speak about the importance of mentorship. Did you have mentors that you seeked out individually, or did they just come into your life? How were you able to rise up in the ranks?
So I don't know that I ever asked anybody, would you be my mentor? I don't know that 25 years ago we did that. I think nowadays the younger generations are taught that. I have a couple of
Yeah.
people that I've mentored and they sought me out. I don't know that we were taught to do that 25 years ago, but I did have a lot of mentors who came along at the right time and showed me the way to, take my own career by the horns. They made introductions for me. If I worked for them or for the same company, they were sort of my champion who allowed me to thrive in the job. So I am a huge believer in mentors and mentorship. And in fact, I talk a lot about, I have 2 people I mentor. I've mentored more, but 2 of them have stuck for about 8 years. I met them separately. They have since become friends, but they were both just out of college, and separately, both of them said, would you be my career mentor? And I remember telling both of them, I don't even know what that means, but you're always welcome to call me. And now if you flash forward 8 years, they both have very successful careers. They're in their 30s now. They're getting their lives going. They give a lot of credit to the fact that they had a mentor who helped them make some good decisions. I don't know if I did or not, but they say I did. But I joke about the fact that they just keep calling. I can't get rid of them. And I call them my fake sons to the point that my wife invites them for Father's Day.
Wow.
So,
Wow, what a story.
But so mentorship goes both ways. I get a lot out of being their mentor. I mean, they've
I agree.
become 2 of my closest friends.
Yeah, once a mentor, always a mentor, right? Yeah, and early on in my career, I didn't network as well. But then over time, I learned the value out of that. But I keep on calling the same mentors that I've had. I'm making new mentors as well. But they've certainly played a big role in my career, Thom.
I had a mentor who was really well known in the Austin business community. I was a young kind of up and comer, and she told me flat out that she would help me. She always took my call. She gave me advice. She introduced me to people, was a big champion. But she always told me, when you get older, you have to pay it forward. And that's why I do that.
Would you say that's the best advice you've gotten from mentors that have stuck?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly up there amongst the top advice. I
There's
forget
some
who
others
said
you
it.
want to share as well?
There was
Besides
a
the top
gentleman
one.
when I first moved to Austin. There was a gentleman named Bob Tinsman. He has passed away many years ago now. He had been city manager of the town I lived in. He owned food manufacturing, fast food, but a frozen food, excuse me, manufacturing company. And he gave me a lot of good advice about how to be respectful of the people around you. Sometimes people, when they're young and aggressive, can not be respectful of sort of the senior people in a company. And he gave me some really good advice to always be respectful of everybody, even when you're an adversary.
Yeah.
That was good advice.
Yeah. Respect is kind of like air. You don't know about it until it's gone, right?
Yeah, and we seem to have less of that. I think we have the same amount of air, but we have a lot less respect, I think, right now.
Yeah. Now, did you always see yourself as a speaker early on? How did you, pivot to becoming a speaker?
Yeah, I mean, again, the world was different. I meet a lot of people who are 20 years old who tell me, I want to be a professional speaker. If you go back to the 80s, it wasn't even a thing. The National Speakers Association, barely existed 40 years ago. So it wasn't even an industry. So no, I didn't have any role models or anything. Speakers that I saw early in my youth were famous. They were best-selling authors. They were celebrities. They were sports celebrities. So I never thought about it early on, but I got a chance to speak at an event for a boss of mine who got called away. And he goes, "Oh, I have to give this presentation. Will you go give it?" And I was like 25 years old. And I went and gave the presentation, and it was horrible. And my boss told me, "Yeah, I heard it didn't go very well, but that's okay." He goes, "I sort of threw you out there without a net." He goes, "You have to join a Toastmasters club." And so about 28 years ago, I guess, like 1992, I joined a Toastmasters club, and it turned out I was good at it. And I got the opportunity to practice and learn how to be a speaker, how to get out there and use my voice and make it have, an impact and some power. And so I liked it. So then once I started to know that I was getting good at it, then I started to see some other people doing this. Then I wanted to do that, but I probably didn't think about it till I was 35 years old.
I see. There's so many different qualities and talents and details that you have to think about if you are an aspiring speaker, other than the content and your knowledge, right? Like the vocal inflection. So, did you have separate coaches for all these different details? Let's say a vocal coach or.
No, most of my training, I have to give credit to the Toastmasters organization. I was very active for a decade. When I was about 35 years old, I think it was 2002, I entered the contest at my club.
Yeah.
I had not yet thought about being a professional speaker, or if I had thought about it, I didn't think it was a real opportunity. And I ended up winning at the club. Then I won at the area. Then I won at the division. Then I went to the district. I ended up going to the semifinals. And I came in second at the Toastmasters World Championship of Public Speaking semifinals for region 9 or whatever it was. There were 9 regions. I don't remember what region I was in,
Yeah.
but I did not go to the finals. But I was the runner up to the guy who did, which meant I was in the top 18 people in the world that year who had entered that contest, and 20,000 people around the world had entered. And that's when I started to think, wow, I can do this. But the thing I started learning as I started studying it as an industry is speaking. It's not just about content. You could be the smartest person, a man or woman in the room, and you could stink as a speaker. You can have great content, great theories, great concepts, and nobody wants to listen to you for an hour. Now, by the same token, you can have really soft and fluffy and useless content and be a really talented speaker, and people will listen to you, but you're not going to get rehired. So the trick is finding the happy medium between the two. You have to have actionable content that can change people's lives. And at the same time, you have to have that little X factor that they can't put something on, where when people are watching you, they lean in, that they enjoy being there. And if you can mirror those two sides of it, then you have the opportunity to make money as a speaker. And that's what I wanted to do.
How did you get your first TEDx speaking gig?
So I've only done one TEDx. Most people only ever get the chance, I guess, to do one. Some people have done multiple, but that's an interesting story because I wanted to do it. I was at one of the first TEDx's, like the first year they did it. There was a big one, high produced one in Austin, Texas, where I live. And I attended it. And I thought, this is awesome. So I started, and this is like 10 or 11 years ago, whenever TEDx really took off. And I started applying to TEDx's anywhere I could. And nobody ever selected me. And I applied for years. And then I got discouraged. And I said, well, I have other things I need to do. I guess I'll never do a TEDx. And then about 3 years ago, a friend of mine said she was on a selection committee and they were specifically looking for some people from out of town who were really good speakers. And so I applied for TEDx for a county in Kansas City, Kansas. And I think it's Wyandotte County or something like that. And I was selected. And I think I was kind of a secondary selection. I think they had picked somebody who couldn't do it because I was selected like a month out.
Right.
But that's okay. I wanted to do it and I got the opportunity, and it's one of the highlights. I don't get paid for it, but I've had 20,000+ views. I wish it was 20 million, but I talked about a story that was really important to me. So I was really excited to have the opportunity to do that TEDx, and it really has been something that is a highlight of my career.
Yeah, TEDx videos are inspiring, and I think videos is one of the best ways to kind of energize people. I remember one company that didn't have a lot of resources, that was rather small, especially that grew exponentially, was the largest GI company in the world, actually energized the teams with these TEDx videos. How do you find the source of the energy in the messages that you convey?
I'm pretty enthusiastic about things that matter to me. So somebody asked me one time, as a speaker, could you speak on any topic? And I'm sure that I could get up, you could give me a topic, I could do some research, and within a couple of hours, I could give a speech that would be fine. But I don't think it would have that spark of energy from my soul. And so I stick to things I know. I talk about business development. I talk about potential. I've done a whole 2-year survey on the gap between potential and performance that I call the paradox of potential, because we think highly of potential, but without action, it really doesn't mean anything. And then I talk now a lot about this sort of, how do you make age 50 to 75 the best years of your life? Because I'm living that right now. So I try to stick to things that excite me. And if I'm excited about the topic, then I'm able to get up and give a high energy presentation.
Growing up, I listened to many announcers and I would reenact how they would announce sports games because I found a lot of energy from sports, right? I was the only child and I found that entertaining. I would always find a reason to play a game with my, peers at the time. What role does sports play, if any, in your life?
So I'm one of these people who was never athletic. My parents made me play Little League Baseball because they thought that was like a smart thing to have as parents, to have you play a team sport. And they were probably right, but I was there's a technical term for it, kind of a lame-o. I was a fat kid. I was slow. I didn't have a lot of ambition for sports. So, I played a couple of innings in right field. But I was a friendly guy and I could tell a really good story. And so the rest of the team liked having me on their team. I kept the dugout interesting, and I could always have a good story to spin after the game. And I liked the camaraderie. I liked the people aspect and the social aspect of it. But I only played through junior high. And then I really never did anything athletic again. And I don't even watch sports all that much. Oh. But part of this reinvention at 50 is 4.5 years ago. I got sort of challenged by my daughter to run a half marathon with her, which she never ended up running. I started training and she said, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. But I kept up with it and I lost 30 pounds. And now I run about 15 miles a week, I had never run a mile in my life before I turned 50. And so I find that pushing myself with running has been a thing that has helped me sort of re-engage and grow and learn. So I wish I had been more into sports because now I see the value of pushing yourself, pushing your body leads to you being able to push your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in charge of helping restructure a company culture initiative at one startup. And I was in this focus group, right, of very experienced individuals where I was talking about the importance of legacy and that purpose. And I got a lot of pushback from some of my great experienced colleagues who told me, well, legacy is something that's kind of in the past that you think about, after your career is over. And, legacy is one reason that I actually started this All Out Coach podcast as well. right? Because I want to transform my industry. I want to help create other leaders, because I think that we all of us can do that. And that's what really was striking about you. And that's why I wanted to interview you, Thom, because you've clearly been successful in your career, but then you reflected on yourself and became a speaker, and you wanted to really extend your boundaries, right? So how have you been able to do that now with COVID? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I can. And before I do that, I want to touch on this word legacy. I think it has been sort of taken over. A lot of people think that leaving a legacy has to do with money or awards.
Right.
Um, I have these two people I mentioned who I mentor, and I recently went on a camping trip with them, and we were sitting around and we were talking about finances. And I'm not independently wealthy. I don't have the rest of my life at 54 years old. I don't have my retirement all funded. I'm not broke, but I still have a long way to go. And I was talking to them, because I'm their mentor, about, starting younger and saving. And one of them looked at me and they said, "Yeah, but you're rich in life." And I said, "I'm not sure." I knew where they were going, but I said, "I don't know exactly what you mean." And he goes, "You are richer in life and relationships than most people that I know." And he goes, "The money will come or it won't." But, he goes, "I think legacy has to do with the people that you touch." And so I've really hung on to that the last few weeks, that there's something really powerful in that legacy is not about awards and money. Legacy is about the people you touch. So you bring up this whole world of COVID. I mean, that's kind of what's kicked me in the pants financially. Is, as a professional speaker, I speak at about 40 events a year as either the speaker or the master of ceremonies at like a large association conference, or I go into smaller companies and do training for like a law firm or a bank or a consulting firm. And it's all based, and has been for 11 years, on me being physically there. So I'm on planes. I'm gone about 100 nights a year, about 40 round trip flights. But here's the issue. It all came to a stop. I call March 13th the day my business died. And I don't look at that in necessarily the most horrible of terms, but it was pretty sad to watch, 35 events for the rest of the year just absolutely vanish. So, one of the things I've had to do is sort of reinvent myself yet again. I mean, I started this process when I turned 50, and I've grabbed onto this idea that I'm going to make age 50 to 75 the best years of my life. Well, my business stopped. I could sit in the corner and cry,
Right.
or I could say, what else could I do? So I've pivoted to doing some online training for companies who want their people to get more engaged, because so many people are isolated and lonely. And I've been teaching networking and connection skills for 15 years. So I'm taking those skills into, what can we do? How do we socially tighten while we have to socially distance? And there's a lot of things that people can do, whether they're introverts or extroverts. There's so many different digital tools. And so I'm teaching some of that. I also took a business development job with an executive search firm, a company called Stanton Chase International, which is one of the top executive search firms on the planet. And they were a client of mine. I had spoken at their executive partner meeting 4 or 5 years ago. And because I meet a lot of people and I work in a lot of different companies, they had talked to me about working for them in conjunction with keeping my speaking business. And I wasn't interested 5 years ago, but I've kept in touch. I'm friends with the gentleman who runs North America. And this year we had a meeting, and I decided that I was going to dedicate, part of my life, the next 15 years, to that industry. So I'm in the process of learning. And there's nothing better in the middle of a pandemic than every week to have to sit down for several hours and learn a brand new job. It keeps my mind really fresh, because it's the same, yet it's different from anything I've ever done. In conjunction, I'm still speaking. So being busy is part of my legacy, I think.
Yeah, Isaac Newton wrote his famous theories during the London Plague. Alexander Pushkin as well, his Encyclopedia of Russian Life, right? While during the isolation too.
And you can't sit back and hide and wait for it to go away, because the predictions are we're going to be in the middle of this for another 6 months to 18 months. And that's a long time. If we're doing this, where we're just having Zoom conversations for 18 months, the studies show that social skills, like how we connect with other humans, it's like muscles. If you don't work them out, they'll atrophy. So we're going to end up with a lot of people who are lonely, isolated, and awkward at dealing with other people in the business world once the world opens up again. So I am trying really hard to help myself and help other people bridge that gap.
Reflecting back on my own life, hearing you making those comments, I also, have been helpful to a few people, a few companies throughout my career, I would like to think. And I speak 4 languages. I've worked for global companies, but I haven't really even scratched the surface, I think, of maximizing my potential. So I'm always looking to upskill right now, and would you say that that loneliness, that that the importance of we at the end of the day, we do spend a lot of time alone right now. We're more distracted than ever, right? And we're more specialized than ever. So do you think that coaches are important for those reasons, or how can the next generation utilize people who have energy like you better? Are they really utilizing their opportunities?
Well, yeah, and we are in unprecedented, uncertain times. There's,
Right.
before COVID, there was stuff written about an epidemic of loneliness. Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was the Surgeon General under President Barack Obama, has written a book called Together, which is an expansion of an article he wrote for Harvard Business Review around this epidemic of loneliness. Now you throw us into COVID, and people are much more isolated and lonely than they've ever been. The good news is, imagine, Tim, if this pandemic had come around and we had to shut the world down like we have. If this was 1997, we barely had the internet. We didn't have the ability to stream. Not everybody used email. There were no smartphones. That would have been a disaster if people had to be in their homes alone without the technology. But we now have really good, amazing technology. We have streaming. You and I are filming this on Zoom. We're able to see each other and talk and see the smile on each other's face when we're talking.
Right.
So now is the best time ever to go through a pandemic, because you don't have to be as lonely. But people who want to, get help, I mean, there's certainly, if you're really struggling with mental health issues, there's no stigma in getting professional help. So number one, now you can go to a counselor. You can go and see a therapist via Zoom. So that's awesome. If people, if that's the thing that they need, you have that. If you just want to listen to a podcast or watch some inspiring videos, you could do that for months. I mean, there's so much inspiring videos and podcasts that exist out there.
Yep.
And then if you want to have that directed help for your business, for your career, where you want to hire a coach, it used to be you had to live near the right coach. And if your town didn't have a lot of choices, what could you do? Now you can find people like you, people like me, an unlimited amount of people who can help you with whatever you need the coaching in. So if you need business development skills coaching, you can find that. If you need presentation skills coaching, if you work in a specific industry like pharmaceuticals, you can find people who coach executives like you do in that. I work a lot with attorneys who want to grow their practice. People can find that by Googling like business development coach for lawyers. Boom, you get a whole bunch of choices and you can pick one from there. So the good news is you don't have to be alone, even if you have to be alone.
Yeah. You have a lot of experience in marketing and business development, yet a lot of the success depends on still a lot of that word of mouth and what you use, I think, in your tagline, which I would love you to for you to share with the audience. How has marketing changed, and what are some tips that you have in reinventing yourself with the new marketing opportunities now, marketing your message?
Well, I definitely think that marketing is different from the days that I was the marketing director for a law firm or a bank or a consulting firm. In the last 10 years, so many different things have changed sort of across the board, in this. But a lot of it really comes down to still people, right? When it comes down to it, people want to do business, whether it's a firm you hire or a product you buy, or if it's someone you're going to promote inside your company. People want to do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. Now, I realize that's a little bit of a cliche. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. But it's totally true, and it always has been true. The difference is the definition of the word know, K-N-O-W, has changed in the last decade because of mobile phones and social media. We now think we know everybody. People listen to my podcast. They go, "Oh, I know you." No, you know what I talk about on my podcast. You don't know, you don't know you don't know my thoughts and feelings. You know what I choose to talk about. So when you follow someone on social media, you only know the side of them that they choose to put out there. It used to be We would get to know somebody through shared experiences, and it could take
Mhm.
years. And along the way, like and trust would come, or it wouldn't come, because you're not going to like or trust everybody. And that's okay. And by the way, not everybody's going to like and trust you. Now, I always joke, don't tell your mother, but it's true. Not everybody's going to like me, and that's totally fine. So the key to it is that you really, if you want to market yourself, you have to do it by personally letting people know you care. If people know that you're a person who's out there trying your best and that you care, they're going to be drawn to you, versus if they think, you're just somebody who's looking for likes, links, shares, and follows along the way. So
Yeah.
that's sort of my thought.
That is such an important message for the next generation leaders, I think, to listen to. And can you also tell the listeners your tagline on LinkedIn, which I found quite
I was wondering what you're talking about. Yeah. So I call myself the human connection catalyst,
Yeah.
because that's what I've been teaching for 15 years is, I don't like the term networking, because a lot of people have negative connotations about it. The word itself, if you look up the definition of the word networking in a business context, it is the creation of long-term and mutually beneficial relationships between two or more people, where everybody finds success because of the relationships. So there's nothing negative about that. Who wouldn't want long-term and mutually beneficial relationships? But the definition has been messed with, and people think of networking, they think of horrible, cheap wine, stale cheese, and people standing around at a chamber of commerce function shoving business cards at everybody. I don't know anybody who shoves business cards at everybody, but that's what they think happens at a networking event. So we've been messed up of what it means to network. So I try to use the word human connection, because when we have real human connections, that's where opportunities come from. Because here's the thing, all opportunities in our lives, all of them, come from people. I mean, you're sitting in a chair right now. I'm sure it's a fine chair, but that chair is not going to refer you a piece of business. However, the people who you're connected with through personal interactions and through your involvement with LinkedIn and other things like that, some of those people you can develop relationships with, and they're going to refer people to listen to your podcast. They're going to refer people to hire you to coach them, etc. Same thing for me. Almost all of my business as a speaker or as a person who works in executive search, every single opportunity I have in either one of those businesses comes from referrals. It's very rare that someone Googles keynote speaker or virtual master of ceremonies and finds me, right? I mean, I'm there, but I'm not coming up number one. So I'm not getting rando people hiring me. Same thing is true with my executive search world. Companies aren't saying, let's Google executive search person. Instead, they're like, wow, we have to hire a CFO who knows somebody who can help us. And they get referrals, and then they talk to two or three people. So it's that human connection that leads to the referral. And that's where the opportunities come from.
Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying that, Thom. I'll be honest with you. I've never been that great at networking. I'm improving a little bit now, right? I'm learning through LinkedIn. But if I trace back any success I've had in my career, I can probably stitch those moments of those mentors I've had in terms of the quality, but not the quantity of the mentors or relationships that I've been able to form. And that's what I try to focus on right now, right? One meaningful relationship at a time. That's what my tagline is: adding energy, excitement, and character, one meaningful relationship at a time. And what I want to tell you also is that that number of followers also is not something that really concerns me. But to some people, I think networking that you mentioned, is not really related to respect, right? It's related to quantity, and that's why people have those negative connotations, like you mentioned. So I've known people who can butt into your conversation, just come in because they want to meet that person that you're talking to, right? And they just take that person away, and I've never been one of those people, but I think we all know those kinds of networkers, right? Hyper networkers, or whatever you want to call them.
They're few and far between, though. They get a lot of press. I know a person who always talks about, the horrible networkers and all this. And then I go to events, and, there's not that many of the horrible networkers. More often you have people who are too shy and not aggressive enough. It's rare that you have people that are too aggressive. Oftentimes you have people who you need to pull into the conversation, not somebody who comes and takes it, who comes in and tries to take it over. So as far as like the social media numbers, I don't care if you have millions of followers or 19 followers. If those 19 are giving you lots of leads and you're making money, then it doesn't matter. I recently had a consultant who wanted me to hire them, and he kept telling me and this was back in March, since December, I've added 5,000 people to my LinkedIn. Well, I didn't care, but he kept saying it. And so I went and I looked at his LinkedIn, and when he had a post, he had almost no likes and no comments. So the fact that he had followers meant nothing because nobody was engaged with what he was saying. So when people tell you, oh, I have so many connections on social media, you have to then go look at the next level and see if they actually have conversation. Because networking, whether it's online or in person, it's about a give and take. It's not about a broadcast.
Yeah. In terms of reinventing ourselves, I want to ask you about how, what advice you give to the next generation leaders, in terms of how to be self-driven, just like you have been in your career, right? What is some advice you would give?
So one of the things that really changed my life over the last 4 or 5 years has been sort of a mantra that I've adopted, and that is try new things. What I have found is that it's really easy for people, myself included, to get into routines and to just assume the way you do things is the right way to do things. And so if you live by a mantra of trying new things, it by definition will open up new doors for you. You don't have to like everything that you try. And so I try new ways of sort of organizing my business. I try new ways to get my inbox to zero. I'm horrible at it, but I try. I keep reading things and trying new ways to organize my tech. I try new things in my social life, right? I'm scared of heights. So one of the first things I did 5 years ago is I went and jumped off of a high building at a thing you pay like $100 to get to leap off the Stratosphere Hotel in Las Vegas. And I will tell you, for a person who's very scared of heights, it was scary, but I did it. And I was super proud of myself because it was against anything I would have done 3 years earlier. And then a couple of years later, we were in Las Vegas again, and my daughter and her fiance were with us. And she said to her fiance, my dad did that thing, and pointed up at the big 108-story jump. And I said, do you want to do it? And he said, well, it's kind of expensive. And I said, let it be my Christmas present to you, because there's nothing you want to do more to the guy who just got engaged to your daughter than throw him off a 108-story building. So that's not true. He's a great guy. I love him. But I said, why don't you do it? I'll pay for it. And my wife said to me, well, you have to do it with him. And I'm like, I've done it. I did it 3 years ago. Why would I do that? And so I did it again. And I will tell you, it wasn't as scary or as exciting the second time. So what I've learned is that when you put yourself out there and you try things, you get a much better perspective of what things that you've tried are all about. So it turned out it was totally safe. It wasn't scary. I'm glad I did it the second time, but would I do it a third time? I don't know. I probably don't need to. So, I think that that's the best advice I can give people is don't be stuck in your ways. Another really good piece of advice comes from my father. Best advice I probably ever got. And that is be slow to anger and fast to forgive. My dad told me when I was a teenager, I used to get mad at things that would happen.
Can you repeat that? Sorry, because I had a notification here.
Be slow to anger and fast to forgive. So, when I was in high school, like a teenager, I'd get mad at things and I'd get it all under my skin. And my dad told me, you'll have a much better life and live longer if you just don't get mad too fast. I mean, there's reasons to get mad. There's reasons to be angry, but don't jump there too fast. Make sure it's a legit thing. Because so often you get really, really mad. Then you find out the person really didn't mean to hurt your feelings or whatever. And you're like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. And then his second thing was be fast to forgive. And he added, you don't have to forgive everybody. There are some people who will do wrong in the world. You don't have to like everybody. You don't have to forgive everybody. But when it's appropriate, forgive quickly. And I've lived by that my whole life.
Yeah, it only adds unnecessary catecholamines and stress, holding grudges. I had a personal also message to a number of fellows who were graduating when I was invited to do a keynote. And I told these guys, these fellows at Rutgers School of Pharmacy who are about to start their career in the pharmaceutical industry, to be self-driven, but not self-centered. And, I got one question during the chat from one of the fellows who asked me, well, how do you feel that what you're doing with your All Out Coach really means to your children in terms of legacy? And I responded to them that I actually get my daughter to listen into some of the videos that I do on YouTube and All Out Coach. You mentioned your child, your children, your family, and I think it's an important way for them to kind of be involved in some of these lessons early on. I often say that if leadership lessons were mandatory or were required as early as childhood, that then leadership would not be such a foreign language as adults. And so I shared a personal story with my daughter, who we were actually at a park, Thom, once, and somebody had dropped a $20 bill, and there was no one in the immediate vicinity, right? So I made it a point to her we picked it up, and we were kind of just looked proactively, right, for someone, and we saw there's a line somewhere near a vending stand, probably about 10 people there. And I made it a point to kind of just ask, oh, did anybody lose any money, right? So there's one guy who said, oh, is it $100 bill? And and he was kind of he was kind of joking about it, right? So I knew right then and there that wasn't the owner of that $20 bill, which was torn, by the way. Then there was another lady who was kind of shuffling around in her bag, and she's like, "Was it torn?" I said, "Yes, it was," and I gave it to her. But what really, stood out to me was the comment that my daughter made later, because she said, "Daddy, it's that paid forward video, right? When you try to help people." Right? That's what you try to help it with, that you do on All Out Coach. So to me, that's like that legacy that we're talking about, that you're focusing on, that I'm focusing on, regardless of our age, our background, our status.
And it is true that when you give those advice, your kids do listen. At the time, they roll their eyes when you make them watch a video or something like that. But I've seen it. I have adult children now, and I've seen it. They'll do things that they picked up on because of things that my wife or I did or taught them. And it's like, oh, they were listening after all. Who knew?
Yeah, you discover that later. Yeah. Just a few questions that I want to end with. One is, what are some of the most memorable presentations that you have delivered? And what was what did they contain? If you get into a little bit of detail for those who are aspiring speakers who want to transition themselves and want to try themselves out as speakers.
So I guess the first one I have to talk about is my TEDx talk again. And that is, I talked about what I called the art of giving small. And the message was all about how you don't have to be rich or come from a family who has your name on the wall of a hospital in order to support a charity. And my youngest daughter, who is now a freshman at a prestigious university, she's very smart and has grown up very well. She was born with a medical condition where the bones in her skull were fused together, and she had to have the entire top of her skull removed when she was 6 months old. So it was a really horrible thing to go through. But my wife and I started a giving program. And every time I give a speech, we just give a little bit of money to Children's Hospital where she was operated on. And so the chance to tell that story, it wasn't something I had made it wasn't a secret, but it wasn't something I'd made a big splash with. To tell that story was a speech that stands out in my career of speaking. Another one was the first time I was ever paid to speak. And this was probably 15 years ago. And somebody I knew, they were looking for someone to do some training at a law firm. And it was before I had even worked at a law firm. This was, about that time. And I was paid a very low number, but it seemed like it was $1 million, because who would pay to listen to me? I forget what it was, but it was like $50 or $100. And I thought, wow, I was paid to speak and do this thing. So the first time to actually get money to speak was one that sort of stood out to me. Yeah. And then right now, I would have to say that it's the last keynote I ever gave before COVID on a live stage, just because one of my bucket list items was I always wanted to speak in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And there was a manufacturing association that brought me with them to Honolulu to their conference. And it was a great group of people. The people were super nice. I got up and did a talk on sort of leadership and potential inside companies. But the great part of it is that since I had to go so far, I got to spend a couple of days in Hawaii, and I hadn't been there since I was 20. And so it was a lot of fun to be able to do that. So those are three very different ones that stand out, but I've given 1,000 speeches. So, we could fill like 4 hours of me telling stories about different types of speeches.
Is there one piece of advice that you would give to somebody to make their speech more memorable? What would that be?
Tell stories. A lot of people think it's all about the data, and your content is important. But if you don't have stories, then it's no good. And I spoke the other day via Zoom to a law school class, And one of the questions, it was about presentation skills. And one of the questions was, well, is it better to have a forced story to start or no story? And I said, why would you have to have a forced story? Find a really good story. And they were like, well, I don't have any stories. We all have stories in our lives, in our careers, in our families. I use a lot of stories about my kids and use them as an analogy for business. So, but it's a learned skill to be able to take a story and craft it for a speech. So you can't just throw a story in, but my advice would be learn to tell a story.
You mentioned kids. I've learned a lot about leadership after becoming a parent. And that's why Simon Sinek, when he defines leadership as parenting, right? Or he makes an analogy between the two. And, since my daughter and my son were born, I've also tried to kind of redefine myself a little bit, because when I was little, for example, I used to love music, right? But I would never remember one song from beginning to end by heart. As a result of becoming a parent now, I have a whole repertoire of probably 6 or 7 songs that I've learned, that I've taught them from beginning to end. So it doesn't have to be something difficult for us to stretch ourselves.
Yeah. And the other thing is I have always, since my kids were little, I have adult children now, right? They're 18 and 23, but since they were little, I've always talked about them, not just in my speeches, although I do talk about them when I present, but I've always, if I'm at a dinner party or whatever, in front of them or not, I always talk up what their strengths are. I always told them I thought that they had a lot of potential, and they heard that and they noticed it. I got criticized by somebody one time who said that, I bragged about my kids too much, or I talked about my kids too much. And my thought was, as a kid, which side of that would you want your parent to fall on? The parent who didn't speak of you, or the parent who bragged on you too much? And, I stand by the fact that I don't think you can say enough good things about your kids because they're listening.
Who are some other speakers that you'd like to recognize and that inspire you?
The list, I've been so fortunate that so many of the people who were my idols in the speaking industry, I've had an opportunity to meet. I've been very active member for 11 years in the National Speakers Association, and many greats have come through that organization. My idol, long before I was a professional speaker, was a gentleman named Harvey Mackay. In the 1990s, he was one of the most prolific authors and speakers out there. I wrote a book. His most famous book was probably How to Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. He took me under his wing when I first wanted to be a speaker. I wrote him a letter, and he called me. This is before the internet. I couldn't email him. And he gave me advice. And I had the opportunity like 4 years ago to interview him for Speaker Magazine. They had asked some up and coming speakers to interview their idols, and I grabbed Harvey Mackay as mine. And so I got to spend some time with him. So, he's one. I couldn't talk about the speaking business without tipping my hat to Harvey Mackay. But I'll just name 3 people who your audience would have never heard of. And they're 3 of my peers who are friends of mine. And they're 3 very different topics. But the reason I think of them is you brought up Simon Sinek.
Yep.
So Simon Sinek talks a lot about the why. So my friend Jerry O'Brien talks about the because. And so he's basically taken the idea of knowing your why even farther. And Jerry is writing a book right now about knowing your because the why is nice, but if they don't know the purpose behind it, if they don't know the because, it's hard to go the whole distance. And he has an amazing career speaking in a lot of different corporate type industries with the power of because talk that he does. So he is one. Another one is a woman named Jessica Pettit, Pettitt. She has far too many T's in her name. And she is one of the leading speakers on diversity and inclusion. And she's been doing it for 20 years. And before that was an important topic that now, of course, is something that every company wants and needs. She's been, banging that drum, if you will, to get people to rally around the cause of just inclusivity. And she is phenomenal. And she's really funny. She used to do stand-up comedy, so she's really funny. And in these really weird times of politics, companies hire her to speak like the week after the election, just whoever wins, let's bring it back down. She's very good at dealing with difficult conversations. And then the third one is a woman who, her name is Eliz, like Elizabeth, but just Eliz Green, Greene. And she speaks on how to deal with stress and uncertainty. And boy, in our current times, she's become a really popular speaker virtually because stress and uncertainty You got to stress proof your whole career if you want to get through what's going on with COVID. And she and I host a video podcast together called The Webinar Talk Show. And it lives on Facebook at Webinar Talk Show and then at webinartalkshow.com. But she and I host it, and it's an interview style webinar. Instead of a talking head over PowerPoint, we get experts to come on video and we chat with them about their knowledge. And so those three speakers are just three of the most dynamic speakers I've ever met.
Thank you, Thom, so much for inspiring us all, I think, to reinvent ourselves, to pivot, to find more strengths within ourselves than we were ever aware of in the future. I think you've done that in this short time that we've had. How can people contact you, and where? Please tell our audience who's going to listen.
So you can find everything about me pretty much at thomsinger.com. That's THOMSINGER.com. And then my main podcast is called Making Waves at Sea Level. And that's C as in like C-suite, CEO, CFO, CIO. You can find Making Waves at Sea Level on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, kind of everywhere you get your podcast love.
Is there an email that you'd like to share?
Yeah, just Thom at thomsinger.com. Don't forget the H.
So don't forget the H, guys. THOM at thomsinger.com, right?
Yep, that's it.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Thom, so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.